Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise, unpack complex ideas, and really pull out the most important insights for you. Today, we're diving deep into what truly makes an executive effective. We're drawing heavily from Peter F. Drucker's, well, it's a timeless classic, isn't it? The Effective Executive.
Absolutely. And our mission today really is to give you a shortcut to understanding that effectiveness, it isn't some kind of innate genius, or just having a charismatic personality.
Right.
It's actually a set of practices, things you can learn, things you can repeat, and we'll explore why mastering these is, frankly, more critical now than ever. And most importantly, how you can apply them, how you can turn your knowledge, your ideas into real, tangible impact.
Okay, let's break this down from the very beginning then.
Mm-hmm.
Drucker challenges a really fundamental assumption about what management even is.
Yeah.
He argues it's not primarily about managing other people,
Right.
but about managing oneself for effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that distinction so crucial, especially today?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is how Drucker highlights this massive shift in society. Think about it. A century ago, very few people really had much interaction with large organizations.
Yeah, totally different world.
Exactly. Now, almost everyone, especially if you've got advanced schooling, you spend your entire working life inside one of these organizations. And this means individual accomplishment and, honestly, the survival of our society is it increasingly hinges on how effective people are within these structures. It's a whole new ballgame.
So it's this new reality where the knowledge worker is now central. How does that transform our old ideas about effectiveness? What does it mean for, like, their output?
Yeah, and this raises a really critical question. If the center of gravity has shifted, right,
Hmm.
from manual workers to knowledge workers, people using their brains, not just their hands,
Mm-hmm.
how do you even measure their output? It's not like digging a ditch or making a shoe where you can see the result.
Right, it's intangible.
Totally. Knowledge products, ideas, information, strategies, they're basically useless by themselves. A knowledge worker must provide effectiveness. And here's the kicker. You can't supervise them closely, not in the old way. They have to direct themselves towards performance, towards actual contribution.
And what's really counterintuitive, I think, about Drucker's take is that effectiveness isn't necessarily linked to being super intelligent or imaginative or even charismatic. He points to people like Harry Truman. Zero charisma, apparently,
Yeah.
but incredibly effective.
Yeah.
He even says some of the most effective people are kind of plodders. So if it's not innate talent, what is it?
It's a discipline, a learnable discipline, just like learning to play the piano. You might not be born a Mozart, right, with this amazing gift, but you can definitely learn to play your scales with the same rigor, the same dedication as a master pianist like Arthur Schnabel. The effective executives Drucker studied, they were all over the place in terms of temperament, abilities, wildly different. But they all shared one thing, that disciplined ability to consistently get the right things done. It's not about being smart, it's about being effective.
Okay, so if effectiveness is a discipline, something you learn,
Hmm.
what's one of the first, maybe most personal practices someone needs to master? Drucker talks about work how you work best. That's not just liking your desk chair, is it?
No, not at all. It's much deeper. It's about recognizing your fundamental wiring, like being right-handed or left-handed. It's that ingrained. Some people are night owls, others are morning larks. Some learn best by reading, others need to hear it. Some need those long, deep stretches of focus.
Yeah, like me.
Others thrive on short, intense bursts. The crucial thing is taking responsibility, really figuring out how you work best and then leveraging it. And the sooner you do that, the more effective you become over time. It compounds. It's about optimizing your nature, not fighting it.
That focus on optimizing yourself leads right into managing what Drucker calls your most unique, your most finite resource,
Yeah.
time. He said something really provocative, that we're ill-equipped to manage time. What does he mean? That we don't
Yeah.
have a good time sense?
Yeah, exactly. And psychological experiments actually show this pretty vividly. You put someone in a sealed room, no clocks, no daylight.
Right.
They lose track of time incredibly quickly. They just can't reliably estimate how much has passed. So for knowledge workers, for executives, this has a huge implication. You need pretty large, continuous, undisturbed chunks of time to be truly effective.
Undisturbed, yeah.
Trying to squeeze something complex, like, I don't know, a really meaningful performance review with someone into a 15-minute slot, that's just kidding yourself.
Yeah, it never works.
It just won't work. You need an hour, probably more. Time isn't just, a resource to allocate. It's the raw material you need for thinking.
Okay, so given how precious time is and how bad we are at judging it, Drucker then gets into this Pretty radical idea for using those big chunks. Concentration. Total focus. He even brings up Mozart here, which is fascinating. What's the core idea about focus?
It's about doing one thing, maybe two, at the absolute most. And yeah, Mozart was apparently this rare exception, juggling masterpieces.
The exception that proves the rule.
Maybe, because most other top composers, Bach, Handel, they focused intensely, one major work at a time, didn't move on until it was done, or at least set aside properly. The fundamental truth, Drucker says, is that very few people can actually perform with real excellence on three or more major things at once. Concentration means doing one thing at a time, doing it fast, and pouring all your energy into that one achievement. Singular effort, not scattered.
This intense focus on what matters now seems to connect directly to another really crucial practice. Slowing off yesterday. That sounds a bit harsh. What does it really mean for an executive?
It's maybe less harsh and more courageous. It takes real guts. It means systematically reviewing your work, your team's work, and asking this really blunt question. If we weren't already doing this, knowing what we know now, would we start doing it?
Wow.
And if the answer isn't a clear, unconditional yes, then you have to either drop it completely or cut it back sharply. This isn't just about being efficient. It's about liberating your best resources, especially your best people, their strength, their talent for tomorrow's opportunities.
Right, freeing things up.
Exactly. Think about, say, government agencies still regulating industries that barely exist anymore. Is it because nobody had the courage to stop? DuPont, he mentions, famously abandoned products before they even started to decline. They chose not to waste resources defending yesterday. Drucker argues it's the only way to truly make space for the new.
Okay, let's shift to decision-making. That's often seen as the core executive task, right? But Drucker points out it's rarely a clear choice between right and wrong. It's usually more like almost right versus probably wrong. So, faced with that ambiguity, where does an effective executive even start?
This is so important. The most crucial point Drucker makes is that effective executives, they don't start with the facts. They actually start with opinions.
Opinions, not facts.
Right, opinions, which are really just untested hypotheses.
Yeah.
And to test them, you first need to figure out the criteria for relevance, especially how are you going to measure things. Like, just looking at an average accident rate across a whole factory might totally hide the fact that actually most accidents happen in one or two really specific dangerous spots.
Okay, got it.
You have to go out and look, as he says, get beyond the averages, see the specifics.
So the very first practice, even before digging into data, is asking what needs to be done. That sounds simple, but I bet executives struggle to separate that from what they want to do, or what seems easiest.
That's absolutely the core challenge. Take Harry Truman. He unexpectedly becomes president, his personal wish.
Yeah.
Finish the New Deal.
Right.
But when he really asked himself what needs to be done now for the country, he realized foreign affairs had to be the absolute priority, and he shifted his entire focus. Or Jack Welch at GE. He understood the company needed to get out of businesses where they weren't number one or two, even though he personally wanted to expand overseas more. The effective executive focuses, one, maybe two, truly urgent tasks. Then, after that top one is done, they don't just move to number 3 on the old list, they fundamentally reset priorities. Welch apparently did this every 5 years or so.
And the second practice you mentioned, asking, is this the right thing for the enterprise? How is that different from just asking if it's good for, say, shareholders or employees?
It's about the long-term health, the mission, the integrity of the whole organization. The example he uses is DuPont again. Even family members only got promoted if they were demonstrably, measurably better than non-relatives at the same level. Why? Because a decision that isn't truly right for the enterprise's core purpose and health won't ultimately be right for any single stakeholder group in the long run. Not shareholders, not employees, not customers. It's about serving the institution's mission first.
This brings us to actually solving problems.
Yeah.
How do effective executives classify situations? Is every fire unique?
Definitely not. They make a critical distinction. There are generic problems, the kind that happen repeatedly and need a rule, a principle, a standard procedure to solve them efficiently. Then there are truly unique events, which he says are actually pretty rare. And then there are new events that look unique, but are actually the first signs of a new generic problem emerging. Like he mentions the 1965 power blackout or the thalidomide tragedy as examples of those. The biggest mistake, the most common one, Drucker says, is treating generic situations as if they were unique, one-off events. That leads to frustration, spinning your wheels. He was critical of the Kennedy administration's pragmatism. For this reason, treating everything as unique often led to little success. Except, ironically, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they finally applied a clear principle.
And the book really stresses starting with what is right, not just what is acceptable. That feels bold, almost idealistic in a world that seems built on compromise. How does that work?
It's absolutely foundational. Alfred P. Sloan, the GM guy, when he hired a consultant, he told him flat out, don't you worry about the compromises. Sloan can't make the right compromise unless you first tell him what right is.
Interesting framing.
Drucker then talks about two kinds of compromise. There's the half a loaf is better than no bread kind, where you still meet the essential requirements, the boundary conditions. And then there's the half a baby is worse than no baby at all kind, where the compromise violates the fundamental conditions, making the whole thing pointless or worse. Kennedy learned this the hard way with the Bay of Pigs, but then in the Cuban Missile Crisis, he knew exactly what right looked like, so he knew which compromises were acceptable, like pulling missiles from Turkey later, and what was non-negotiable, the Soviet missiles leaving Cuba now. You need that clear picture of right first.
So disagreement, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a tool that really cuts against the grain for a lot of organizations that value harmony above all else. How do you use disagreement productively?
Precisely. Disagreement is vital. It's your best protection against becoming a prisoner of your own organization's biases or even just your own assumptions. Every department has their own angle, right? They're special pleaders in a way.
Yeah, naturally.
Encouraging disagreement, genuine disagreement, stimulates imagination. It forces you to explore different options, leading to more creative, more robust solutions. The effective executive doesn't just dismiss dissenters as troublemakers or fools. They ask, okay, why does this intelligent, rational person see this problem so differently? Trying to understand their perspective forces a much more thorough look at the whole issue.
Okay, so a decision's been made, hopefully incorporating diverse views. How do effective executives make sure it actually happens, that it translates into action, not just another memo?
They write an action plan. Simple as that. It's a statement of intent. It's not rigid, it can be revised, but it's concrete. And here's the crucial bit. A decision isn't truly made until herring it out in specific steps becomes someone's specific job, with their name on it and a deadline.
Accountability.
Exactly. Too many great policy statements just fizzle out. Why? Because to carry them out is no one's specific work and responsibility. It has to be assigned.
The source also flags things like not knowing who needs to know and having information in the wrong form as huge time wasters. Can you give us a practical example of how damaging that can be?
Oh, absolutely. There's a classic story. A big manufacturer discontinues a product line. Simple decision, right? But they forget to tell the purchasing clerk.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh is right. The clerk, just doing their job based on old forecasts, keeps ordering parts. The company ends up with, 8 or 10 years worth of totally useless inventory, a massive write-off. That's the kind of disaster that happens when you overlook who needs to know. Another common one, production figures. They're often formatted perfectly for the accountant's upstairs averages, summaries, but the people on the factory floor, they need different data. Ranges, extremes, real-time info to make adjustments. Wrong form, useless information.
It sounds like meetings, which many people see as just the reality of executive life, are actually, in Drucker's view, a symptom of something worse. Malorganization, he calls it. What does that mean?
It means the organization itself is poorly designed. Fundamentally, responsibilities are fuzzy, unclear. Information isn't getting to the right people through the normal structure, so you have to keep calling meetings to patch the gaps.
So meetings are a patch, not a feature.
That's a great way to put it. Drucker famously said, one either meets or one works. One cannot do both at the same time. Harsh, but his point is clear. In a truly well-designed structure, you wouldn't need many meetings. So if executives are spending huge chunks of their time in meetings, that's a sure sign of a poorly structured organization, diffuse responsibility, information bottlenecks. Alfred Sloan at GM, again, he made himself effective partly by sending concise memos after meetings, summarizing decisions, who was responsible for what, and the deadlines. Clear action, clear accountability.
Okay, let's talk, people. This deep dive really hammers home the idea of staffing for strength. What does that actually mean day to day, especially since everyone has weaknesses?
It means you focus relentlessly, almost obsessively, on what people can do, their strengths, not their limitations. Andrew Carnegie, the SEAL guy, he chose this for his tombstone. Here lies a man who knew how to bring into his servicemen better than he was himself. That's the spirit.
Wow.
General Robert E. Lee, another example Drucker uses, kept a general who frequently disobeyed orders. Why? Lee's simple answer: he performs. Effective executives get it. Their subordinates are paid to perform, to contribute, not necessarily to be pleasant or easy to manage. The goal is to structure the work, structure the organization so that a person's strengths become truly effective and their weaknesses become, well, irrelevant. Or at least beside the point. Like, you put that brilliant but maybe socially awkward tax accountant in a back office where they can just crunch numbers brilliantly without needing constant interaction. Use the strength, contain the weakness.
So the goal is to make weaknesses kind of a personal blemish outside of, or at least beside, the work. That's a really different way to think about talent.
It is, isn't it? Precisely. You wouldn't make that excellent but introverted accountant a manager, right? That plays to their weakness. But you absolutely use their unique strength where it delivers results. And here's another key point. If a specific job has chewed up and spat out 2 or 3 capable people in a row, Drucker says the problem probably isn't the people. The job needs to be redesigned. Stop trying to find some mythical perfect fit who'll just become a misfit anyway when the job demands change, because they always do. Fix the job structure.
How does this way of thinking clash with, say, traditional performance appraisals? Those often seem obsessed with finding weaknesses, listing areas for improvement.
Oh, Drucker is pretty brutal about traditional appraisals. He argues they're fundamentally flawed. Why? Because they focus on weaknesses and this vague idea of potential instead of actual concrete performance. He believed they often damage the relationship between a boss and subordinate, and frankly, they're rarely used effectively anyway. Instead, effective executives focus appraisals on performance, measured against the specific contributions expected in their past job and their current one. They ask things like, what are this person's strengths? What have they done well? What do they need to learn or acquire to build on those strengths? And yes, where do they need to improve to make their strengths fully effective? It's performance-based, strength-oriented, and forward-looking.
Okay, what about the concept of the indispensable person? We all know organizations where someone is seen that way. Drucker has a strong take, maybe a tough one for some managers.
Yeah, it's an absolute unbreakable rule for him. You promote the person who, based on the clear evidence of performance, is best qualified for the new job, period. Any argument like, oh, but she's indispensable in her current role, we can't possibly move her, Drucker says that should be dismissed immediately.
Dismissed, just like that.
Just like that. General George Marshall during World War II, he insisted that any general found to be less than outstanding in combat command be relieved immediately. People would argue, but we have no replacement. Marshall flatly refused that argument. Drucker's logic is, if someone is truly indispensable, it signals a failure somewhere. Either a weak superior who hasn't developed their team, or maybe a weak subordinate who isn't growing, or maybe both. Moving that indispensable person forces the organization to confront the weakness, and crucially, it creates opportunities for others to step up.
The source also slips in this kind of bonus practice for executives. It seems almost deceptively simple. Think and say we. What's the real significance there?
It's actually critical for building trust and cohesion. Effective executives, they know they have the ultimate responsibility, yes, but they also understand that their authority doesn't just come from the title. It comes from the organization's trust in them.
Okay.
So they consistently prioritize the organization's needs, the organization's opportunities, before their own ego or personal agenda. That we focus isn't just PR, it actively builds better communication. Think about it. Your subordinates are much more likely to share vital information, to really engage if they feel you're genuinely asking about their contributions, how their knowledge can help the collective we. This focus on contribution turns what could be a burden, dependence on others, into a massive source of strength. It helps create a real team. Like all the different specialists in a hospital, nurses, therapists, doctors, they have to spontaneously self-organize around the patient's needs, the common goal. That's the we in action.
This all sounds incredibly relevant, profoundly useful. But how much does it still apply today? Especially with computers, AI changing everything. Drucker wrote this decades ago. Didn't he predict computers would replace managers?
That's a common misreading. He actually argued almost the opposite in the long run. The computer, he said, is basically a logic machine, a tool. A total moron was his blunt phrase. It can only do what it's programmed to do.
Right, it follows rules.
Exactly. Humans, on the other hand, are perceptual. We're maybe slower, sloppier with logic sometimes, but we're bright, insightful. We can adapt, make judgments, see patterns computers miss. So no, the computer doesn't replace the executive's core function of judgment and decision-making.
Okay, so if it's not replacing us, what is the computer's biggest impact, according to Drucker?
Ironically, its greatest impact comes from its limitations. Because it's so good at handling the logical, the rule-based stuff, it forces a huge shift. It pushes us away from relying on small adaptation, the experienced sales manager just having a feel for which customers need what, towards making decisions based on clear principles, on analyzed data. And this means decision-making can't just stay locked up at the very top anymore. The computer forces middle managers to stop being just operators, just supervisors following orders. It compels them to become true executives themselves, to make genuine judgments about risk, about uncertainty, based on the information the computer provides. This actually creates a vital training ground for top leadership roles, something he felt was often missing. It makes executive effectiveness crucial at all levels, not just the C-suite.
So wrapping this all up, what does this deep dive mean for you, the listener, out there? Someone trying to navigate their career, make an impact.
I think the core message is this. Effectiveness isn't some subject you just learn about in a course. It's a self-discipline, something you have to learn through practice day in, day out. And fundamentally, it's about developing character, things like foresight, self-reliance, and maybe, above all, courage. Drucker pointed out, even back then, that knowledge worker productivity hadn't really improved much since World War II. That's startling. And he argued the key to unlocking that potential lies directly in the effectiveness of executives at all levels. Your standards, the demands you place on yourself, that's what sets the tone. That shapes the motivation and the direction of everyone you work with.
And he ends with such a powerful note on courage. What's the essence of that message for us to really take away and maybe reflect on?
Yeah, it's really inspiring. He writes that courage is much more than mere motion in the face of uncertainty. It's not just acting busy. He says it shows up in 4 specific ways. 1, choosing the future over the past. 2, focusing on opportunities rather than getting bogged down by problems. 3, choosing your own direction based on principle rather than just jumping on the bandwagon. And 4, aiming high. Aiming for something that will genuinely make a difference, not just playing it safe with something easy. This whole deep dive, really, and the incredible book it comes from, it's Drucker's challenge, his gift, to you. Learn to be yourself, aim beyond yourself, and work with real courage.
A truly thought-provoking way to think about what it means to be effective, not just as an executive, but maybe as anyone trying to contribute. What stands out most to you from our discussion today?